Hello, my name's David, and in this video I want to briefly share my story as someone who received a very late autism diagnosis, um, and one very later in my life. I received my autism diagnosis about 10 years ago now. I was in my 50s. I was working as a psychology lecturer. I was married with a family, and over, I think, a few years, I began to suspect I was autistic. And it's something that grew over the years, um, until I thought I need to get an autism diagnosis. I remember saying to, we as a couple went to talk to another couple, and I remember saying to them, I think I'm autistic. And as soon as I said that, it really sort of nailed it down in my mind and in my heart, and I thought, yes, I need to get a diagnosis. I think I just had to know. Some people might say, why do you get a diagnosis? Why do you want another label? But actually, I felt I needed to know. I needed somebody to say, this really is who I am. This really is me. And a professional saying that would confirm it somewhere in my heart that was true. I talked it over with my wife, my friends. I decided to approach my GP. I went with my wife. It's always good to go with someone to get the support, to be able to explain why I thought I was autistic. And in fact, I'd written out a long report on myself, a long letter to him, saying all the different aspects and memories and experiences and characteristics that I'd seen in myself that confirmed that. And at first he wasn't going to accept that, but we were assertive. We said, no, this is what we think, this is why we think it, and there's lots of detail here. And so he made that referral. Today, it takes quite a long time through. We're in Britain here, and the NHS system has quite a long waiting list for people having autistic assessments. A decade ago, it took several months, but it was like later the same year rather than years later. Now it can be a couple of years. And eventually I received an appointment for an assessment, and it all took place in one assessment. People that I've been with and supported through Autistic Heroes have had maybe a couple of assessments at least to confirm they're autistic. This was all done in one assessment. I talked with the psychiatrist about lots of things, went through some questions which I now know are come from the AQ that is actually used for research purposes. It's actually meant for research purposes, but it is often a basis for people's diagnosis or a starting point for an interview, a clinical interview to confirm that someone is autistic. So she went through those questions with me, and explored some of the things that I was saying. Then I think one of the most difficult parts was that I went outside and she talked to my uh, wife on her own. And so I thought, just sitting outside waiting while they was talking about me was quite difficult. I think I always want to confirm that this is, another viewpoint. A lot of people that receive autism diagnoses are children, and so there's a parent that they can talk to. They can get an assessment from a teacher and so on. As an older adult, as parents are not alive anymore, my wife was someone to talk to, and but sitting out there on those chairs while they were talking was, I think, quite difficult. Went back in and had a little bit more of a chat about my early experiences, chat about my thinking, and quite insightful questions about some of my ways of approaching uh, thinking and ways of, sort of sometimes slightly compulsive thoughts and talking about those, talking about some of my early childhood, and talk about my mother, who the psychiatrist did confirm could well have been on the autistic spectrum as well. And then finally, she confirming that it was probably a clear case. That she said this is a clear case uh, of someone on the autistic spectrum, which I found absolutely devastating at the time. I thought, oh, maybe she'd say, well, maybe you are. We might say you are. I got to the point where I wanted her to say that I was, but she said, no, this is very clear. And that was a bit of a shock. And I think the um, problem, I think, with an assessment that I found is that it's so negative. And I think that's what the medical model is. It points out deficits. We're looking for what are the deficits here, what diagnosis explains these deficits, and what are the problems that you have. How do these problems affect your life? How do they make your life difficult? And that took me down and down and down emotionally. And so I think when she said this is a clear case, I was thinking, oh, I must be really bad. It must be really difficult for me. And I hadn't realised how difficult it had been for me. And afterwards, I think, in a little bit of a shock. And I remember sitting in a cafe with my wife afterwards and just almost having a meltdown. Well, I did have a bit of a meltdown. And I walked home in a daze, not really believing this. Because what was happening was my whole identity of who I'd been before was collapsing, was melting, was leaving me, and I was coming to a realization I was somebody that I hadn't thought I was, that I was somebody different, and that was quite an emotional experience that took some time to process, and I really went down, but as I began to reflect, and it didn't take long, it was a few hours maybe, and I began to reflect on my life, which I'd done before, but in a new way because I'd received this diagnosis. Someone had said, yes, you are autistic. In fact, it's very clear. So as I began to reflect on my life, I realised how much sense it made of it all, being autistic. I saw, and that began to lift me up again. Began to make me realise, yeah, this is me really understanding who I am. I can see the barriers I had. I can see why some of the things uh, I thought I might be able to do, I found the feedback was I couldn't do them. I didn't get the promotions that I expected. I didn't get some of the jobs that I expected. And I look back and I go, yeah, it was more to do with social skills and being able to do the job. It was more to do with convincing someone in a sociable, communicating way rather than just me being able to do it. And so I saw that, but I also saw, you know, these opportunities that I'd missed were because of my autism and not because I wasn't good, not because I was somehow faulty, but because I was different. Unfortunately, I'd read uh, quite a bit before that, and so a lot of what I'd read came into my mind and came into place as I began to reflect on these things. I saw how I was bullied at school. I saw how perhaps I could have had some help and support at university, but I still did very well. But looking back, I also see how I actually thrived as someone who was on the autistic spectrum, even though I didn't realise it. I've been able to use some of those gifts of focus, some of that ability to uh, think and think differently, see the world differently, be able to analyze what was happening, focus on work, focus on communication sometimes in much better say at leading a discussion or in teaching, which was my career in as a psychology lecturer. I was much better at those things than actually, uh, just trying to contribute into a discussion and not being able to talk, not being able to find my way in. And so I found that there were things that I was good at and things that I wasn't so good at. Understanding my strengths, understanding things like that I was a very loyal person, that I was um, understanding my strengths and understanding my challenges, and has helped me and has helped me since to be the best version of myself now. The interesting thing about getting a diagnosis, you go to a psychiatrist, and one of the things she said at the end is, I won't be asking you back for any more appointments. We've given you a diagnosis. Here's some details about a local organisation that helps people on the autistic spectrum, and thank you very much. There isn't a treatment. Any other specialist, you get a diagnosis, they'd have some treatment for it. They'd have some ongoing support with a specialist, maybe, or something like that, with a lot of conditions. But with conditions that are neurodiverse, like autism, it's very much this is what you've uh, this is who you are, this is what you've got, and this is where you get the support. And I found a discussion group that was really helpful that I went to, but I outgrew that, I think, over the years, over months probably. I outgrew that, and it wasn't long before I set up my own enterprise, Autistic Heroes, that having taken a voluntary redundancy from that lecturing post, I set up Autistic Heroes helping people on a one-to-one basis, and then eventually setting up some workshops discussing lots of issues connected with autism.